you would please start by stating and spelling your full name for the record.
My name is Carly Schneider, K-A-R-L-E-E-S-C-H-N-E-I-D-E-R.
Thank you. Go ahead, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Schneider.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell us what your occupation is?
I am a criminalist at the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, or DCI for short, Crime Lab.
And can you tell us what the job of criminalist entails?
In general, criminalists were assigned to many different sections within the laboratory. In general, we process evidence that's submitted to the laboratory from criminal investigations from across the state of Iowa. We examine that evidence, issue reports, and then testify when requested.
Do the criminalists, such as yourself at the DCI, specialize in a certain type of evidence that you would analyze when it's submitted to you?
Yes, so I am assigned to the DNA section.
And what does the DNA section of the DCI Crime Lab do?
So we examine evidence from criminal investigations. Specifically, if items of evidence are submitted to the DNA section, I may first look for any bodily fluids that may be on an item. I will examine items, take samples, attempt to develop DNA profiles, compare those to any known reference samples that are submitted for the case, issue a report, and then testify if it's requested.
So does your laboratory then receive items from outside agencies that are submitted through a process or a protocol that the lab has?
Yes.
Let's talk about that first. Can you tell us about the protocol for a law enforcement agency to submit items for DNA comparison to the DCI lab?
Generally, items are brought to the laboratory either by mail or physically dropped off. Those items are processed then through the evidence room, documented. They are prepared for us to do our analysis. Once the items are ready to be requested, a criminalist such as myself, I then requested the evidence from the evidence room. I physically walked down to the laboratory evidence room, retrieved the items that I requested, and I will take them back to the DNA section of the lab in a secured storage area and they will stay in the DNA section throughout the duration of my testing.
Let's talk about your background here. Can you give us a rundown of your education, training, and experience? And you can start with your education.
I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in biology from Central College and a Master of Science in Forensic Science from Marshall University. After I was hired at the lab, I completed the DNA section training program. This program included background reading, practical lab exercises, as well as written and oral exams. After successful completion of that training program, I began doing independent casework and have been doing so ever since. In addition to that initial training period, on an annual basis, I will either attend a forensic science conference, watch webinars related to forensic DNA testing, and also read literature related to DNA testing to stay current in the field.
I don't think we gathered from you sort of the timing of some of those things, so can we just go back over, when did you get your BA from Central College?
I graduated from Central College in 2015.
Okay, so in 2015, after graduating from Central College with a BA in what?
Biology.
Biology, okay. Is that when you went to Marshall?
Yes.
Okay, you got your Master's of Science in Marshall?
Yes, Master of Science in Forensic Science.
Forensic Science, okay. Tell us what forensic science is.
Forensic science is this application of science to the law.
And so does that entail then the application of scientific principles such as DNA analysis to criminal law, the evaluation of items of evidence for purposes of criminal trials, criminal prosecutions, those sort of things?
Yes.
And when did you receive your Master's of Science?
2017.
In 2017, after you received your Master's, who were you first employed by, or what job do you have first?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Where'd you go to work after that?
In between, after I graduated from graduate school, I did spend some time working at a winery, and I also worked at Principal Financial prior to being employed by the lab.
When were you hired by the DCI laboratory?
In 2018.
And were you hired as a criminalist?
Yes.
When you were hired as a criminalist for the DCI laboratory in 2018, where were you initially assigned?
I have been working in the DNA section for the duration of my career.
Was that your general focus then throughout your schooling at Central College in Marshall with DNA analysis?
So in Central College, my degree was in biology, and then at Marshall University, I did complete emphases in DNA testing, also forensic chemistry and crime scene investigation. So kind of took coursework in all three of those disciplines.
So then getting hired as a criminalist in the DNA section of the DCI lab with your background, felt like that was a pretty good fit for you?
Yes.
Is that what you wanted to do when you went to college?
I knew I wanted to work in forensics, and after spending some time, I fell in love with biology, and then I do enjoy DNA testing.
Okay. Let's move to February of 2024. Where were you assigned at the DCI laboratory in February of 2024?
I would have been a criminalist in the DNA section.
Did you have an opportunity to receive some evidence in this case, the case of where Melody Hoffmanin is the homicide victim and Mr. Louisma is charged as the defendant?
Yes, I did examine evidence related to this matter.
As a result of receiving evidence related to this case, did you formulate a report that contained your conclusions and interpretation of that evidence?
For this case, I did author 2 DNA reports.
If we could, Your Honor, we'd like to show the witness what's marked as State's Exhibit number 19A. Do you see that in front of you, Carly?
Yes.
What is State's Exhibit number 19A?
State's Exhibit 19A appears to be a copy of one of the DNA reports issued in this case.
And how many pages is that DNA report you're referring to?
For this DNA, it's identified as report number 2. It is a total of 7 pages.
Does this also contain an additional report?
Yes, there is also what has been identified as lab report number 3, which is the second DNA report that I issued in this case.
And what's the date of the second report?
The second report that I issued was finalized on September 11th of 2024.
And then what is the date of the first report?
The date that the first report was finalized was April 11th of 2024.
Even though I think we intended to have 19A and 19B, it looks like everything's in 19A. Is that right?
I did not see another red or a State's Exhibit tag on it. I only saw 19A.
Your Honor, we move to admit State's Exhibit number 19A.
Any objection to 19A?
No objection.
Exhibit 19A is admitted.
And we'd like to publish that when we get the opportunity, Your Honor.
19A is published.
So, Carly, I think the easiest way to do this is just to go through this report, and I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to tell us about what we're seeing on your report, okay?
Okay.
All right. And this report may reference some items that we haven't seen pictures yet here, but it's our understanding here that you can't come back tomorrow, right?
Correct.
So we got to get you in today. Okay. So we'll just go ahead and start here. This says lab case number on it and a report date. So is this the first report that you compiled and formulated in this case?
Yes.
And it looks like it refers to your agency, and then who's the case officer in this report?
It is listed as Special Agent Ryan Kedley.
And does he also work for the DCI?
Yes.
And then as far as subjects here, we have McKinley Louisma and Dakota Van Patten. Is that your understanding that those are the suspects or defendants in this analysis?
From my understanding, yes. Those that information is filled out by the submitting agency prior to submitting, so that's not something that I decided or I put on the report.
And then the victim in this case is known as Melody Hoffmanin, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, going to the first entry here, we'll say items as described by submitting agency. On February 20th, 2024, the following items were submitted to, who's Noah Eelnant?
He is one of the individuals that works in the evidence room at the crime lab.
So would he have been the one who received the items from law enforcement and then began the process of going through that protocol to collect and preserve the items for your later analysis?
Yes, for the items that are listed underneath, it looks like laboratory items 3 through 10. He is the individual that received them in the evidence room.
And in this instance, laboratory items number 3 through 10 are the same as the agency number. Is that right?
Yes.
And does that indicate, at least based on your understanding, that the agency that submitted these items was also the DCI?
From my understanding, that is what happened in these items.
And what items were submitted?
Laboratory and agency item number 3 was a box containing 2 swabs of red stain from the trunk lid of the Honda. Lab and agency item number 4 was 2 sets of Ozark Trail gloves with red stains. Laboratory and agency items 5 was a pink shirt with red stains and duct tape from the trunk of the Honda. Laboratory and agency items 6 was hair stuck to duct tape from trunk of Honda. Lab and agency items number 7 was green paracord from trunk of Honda. Agency and lab items number 8 was a pocket knife with red stains from Honda. Laboratory and agency items 9 was a box containing swabs from McKinley Louisma. And lab and agency items 10 were paper fold containing fingernail scrapings from McKinley Louisma.
Did you find when you ultimately received these items for analysis that these were fairly adequate descriptions of the items that you examined?
Yes.
Okay. And then on February 22nd, 2024, it looks like some more items were submitted to Brandy Lane. Is she also an evidence tech at DCI Lab?
Yes, she is.
Okay. What items were submitted on February 22nd?
Laboratory item 11 is agency item 1 was a item containing right fingernail clippings collected at time of autopsy. Laboratory item 12, agency item 2, was an item containing left fingernail clippings collected at time of autopsy. Laboratory item 13, agency item 3, was sealed sex assault kit bearing the name of Melody Hoffmanin taken at the time of autopsy exam. Laboratory item 14, agency item 4, was underwear of the victim. Laboratory item 15, agency item 5, was a blood standard card taken at time of autopsy exam.
And did these descriptions also adequately represent the items that you examined?
Yes.
And then finally, on March 7th of 2024, it looks like some more items were submitted, this time to Melissa Ozamek. Is she also a lab tech at DCI Lab?
Yes, she works in the evidence room as well.
And what was submitted on March 7th of 2024?
Laboratory item 16, agency item 4, was a swab from unknown flaky yellow substance at Morgan Creek Park. Laboratory item 17, agency item 5, was swabs of unknown dried fluid on parking lot at Morgan Creek Park. Laboratory item 18, agency item 6, was swab from unknown amber substance north of picnic table. Lab item 19, agency item 7, was a swab of unknown substance from south of picnic table. Laboratory item 20, agency item 9, was clear framed glasses. Laboratory item 21, agency item 10, was gray Nike shoes. Laboratory item 22, agency item 11, was gray sweatpants. Laboratory item 23, agency item 18, was forest green Under Armour sweatshirt. Laboratory item 24, agency item 34, was pink Hey Dude shoes. Laboratory item 25, agency item 35, was black capri pants. Laboratory item 26, agency item 42, was a multicolor cell phone case. Laboratory item 28, agency item 52, was a black beanie. Lab number 29, agency number 56, was Van Patten buccal swab.
And then on March 7th of 2024, it says the following items were submitted again to Melissa Ozimek at the DCI lab. What was submitted on that date?
That was laboratory item 30, agency item 67, known swabs, Logan Kimpton.
And it looks like with some of these later items here, there was a different lab number than an agency number. Does that indicate to you that those items that don't have the same number were submitted by an outside agency like the Marion Police Department?
Yes, those items likely came from not the DCI. They may have different agency item numbers because they were submitted and inventoried by a different agency.
Let's turn to the next page here now. And the next entry you have says that photographs were taken of item 7, which, if we go back, is the green paracord from the trunk of the Honda. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us what you're doing here and what you're noting as far as your testing at this point in time in the report.
Do you mean just to explain what each of those paragraphs mean? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that first one says photographs were taken of item 7 by forensic science technician Marcy Batchelor. Just means photos were taken of item 7, which was the paracord. The next one says if an evidentiary profile referenced in this report is stated to be associated with the DNA profile of a specific individual, then the DNA profiles of other individuals profiled in this case can be considered to have been eliminated as possible DNA donors to that specific evidentiary profile. In other words, that means if somewhere in the report it says a DNA profile was associated to an individual, everybody else that has been profiled in this case can be eliminated as being a donor to that profile.
Okay, thank you. What do we have next? Testing was not attempted. Explain that.
Testing was not attempted on every stain on the submitted items. That just means on some of the items that are in the report, I didn't screen every single stain on every single item in this case, and screening is referencing body fluid screening.
So with that statement then, is that put in there to note that even though there might be an item of evidence that contains, let's say, multiple stains that have been identified as blood, you're not going to test every stain?
So yeah, it can mean that there may be numerous stains on an item. I may only screen a few of those stains. So it just says that not every stain on every single item was screened for a bodily fluid. It
might be an obvious answer, but can you explain why you don't test every area?
If an item has, for instance, if it has just one area, maybe of red-brown staining, I will screen that area. If an item has numerous stains, I may take a representative sample of those and just screen different areas on that item. Try to take a representative or number of samples given the case information, just to kind of streamline our testing. And we do know that we can always go back at a later time if additional testing is requested.
So at least initially, is it fair to say that if you were to test every area of an item that has blood stains, that could result in a lot of duplicitous work, maybe unnecessary work, and certainly additional work?
It would certainly be additional work if we screened every single stain on every single item in every single case.
Okay, moving on, talk about the screening.
This says the evidence was screened for the presence of bodily fluids by chemical testing and or antibody antigen testing. That statement just says that some of the items within the report I did do body fluid screening on.
What kind of bodily fluids are you looking for in that screening?
In our laboratory, we have body fluid screening tests for blood, seminal fluid, and saliva.
Talk about the differential extraction procedure for stains containing seminal fluid.
It says the differential extraction procedure for a stain containing seminal fluid attempts to isolate sperm DNA from DNA of other sources. The procedure results in two fractions, one called sperm fraction and the other called epithelial fraction. The sperm fraction is expected to be mainly of male origin. However, some non-sperm DNA may be present. The epithelial fraction may consist of DNA from both seminal and non-seminal origin. So this statement just explains in items that may contain seminal fluid, we do a different type of extraction procedure where we attempt to separate the sperm fraction from the epithelial fraction or non-sperm fraction. So just kind of explaining that process and to say that a differential extraction was performed in this case.
So basically, if you do find the presence of seminal fluid as a result of this screening, then you're going to extract from that seminal fluid what you can find in terms of the sperm, what you can identify as a sperm fraction, and then separate that from epithelial, which is more like skin cells.
Sure. So we will do screening tests. Depending on our screening test, we may still do the differential extraction, even if it's negative for seminal fluid. And then moving on, we will do a differential extraction on a sample in attempts to separate any sperm DNA from non-sperm DNA.
Finally, the evidence was processed for DNA typing by capillary electrophoresis. Tell us about that.
So that's, again, saying evidence was processed for DNA typing by capillary electrophoresis using the Applied Biosystems Global Filer PCR amplification kit. That just says that items of evidence in this case were processed through the DNA workflow, and this is the type of testing that we use in our laboratory.
PCR testing.
Correct.
Can you give us a general version of what PCR testing involves?
Yes, PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction. This particular one's talking about amplification, which is a step of the DNA process where we make millions and millions of copies of the DNA. And then in that PCR process, this kit contains the areas of DNA that we're testing in our laboratory. So we don't test all their DNA. We target specific areas of the DNA. And that is just explaining the kit that we use and the process we use to get there.
So this amplification, you make millions of copies of DNA that you find, in order to be able to see it better?
So what that amplification does is it makes millions of copies, and therefore the next part, the capillary electrophoresis, it is separating the DNA based on its size. So in the end, we get a DNA profile, which is just a visual representation of the areas of DNA that we test.
So when you're able to get a profile, does that then aid you in the ability to compare what you do find to a known profile?
Yes, so we will examine all of our evidentiary profiles. We will determine if they are interpretable. It may be the whole profile is interpretable or just a portion of it. And then if it is interpretable, we will do the interpretation and then compare to any known reference samples submitted in the case. And what that allows us to do is to say whether a person that was profiled in the case could be included or possibly excluded as a contributor to a specific evidentiary profile that is developed.
Okay. And we might get back to that as it relates to your findings. But let's start with your findings here and the results of your examination. It starts with 9, which is noted in your description as a box containing 2 swabs from McKinley Louisma. What did you find when you examined the box containing 2 swabs from McKinley Louisma?
So it says DNA profiles were developed from the known buccal samples of McKinley Louisma. That is laboratory item number 9.
And then you also examined laboratory item number 29 and 30, which are indicated to be the Van Patten buccal swab and the Logan Kimpton buccal swab.
Correct. So DNA profiles were developed from the known buccal samples of Dakota Van Patten and Logan Kimpton as well.
So this gives you that known profile of these individuals to compare to your findings, right?
Yes, for those 3 individuals.
Now, the next thing you examined was lab number 15, which is a blood standard card taken at the time of the autopsy exam of Melody Hoffman. What did you find as a result of that?
A DNA profile was developed from the known blood sample of Melody Hoffman.
And so now you have a known sample of Melody to compare to your findings.
Correct.
Okay. So the next thing we have here is number 3, which is a box containing 2 swabs of the red stain from the trunk lid of the Honda. What did you find there?
Excuse me. Screening indicated the presence of blood on the swabs from the Honda trunk lid. The DNA profile developed matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman. The probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 21 non-million.
So this number, 1 out of 21 non-million, numbers like this appear a lot in your report. I don't think we're going to talk about each number, what it means, but for the first one, can you tell us the significance of less than 1 out of 21 non-million?
So that portion, that sentence about the statistic, what that does is it gives an estimate to the rarity of the profile. So it's just, in other words, you can kind of phrase it in other words, saying if I had 21 non-million grains of sand that are all different, I would only expect to find one particular grain of sand that I'm looking for one time. Out of all 21 non-million opportunities, I would only find it one time. So it's an estimate of how rare this profile is.
And so instead of sand, in this case we're talking about individuals.
Correct.
So you would expect to find a similar DNA profile in less than 1 out of 21 non-million individuals.
Correct. So if there was a population of 21 non-million individuals, I would only expect to find this person one time. So in terms of comparing that to profiles, if we had 21 non-million profiles, I would only expect to find this one profile one time. And that profile was associated to Melody Hoffman.
And then just kind of touching on this number a little bit more here, do you know how many zeros are followed after 1 non-million?
1 non-million would be the number 1, followed by 30 zeros.
And obviously this exceeds the human population by a lot.
Yes, for reference, the world's population is approximately 8 billion.
Is that why in the same sentence you're able to put the DNA profile developed match the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman?
So the reason I can say it matches is that from the DNA profile that was developed from the evidentiary profile, the swabs from the Honda trunk lid, at each area of DNA that we tested, the DNA that was developed, the markers were the same at every location as they were in the known blood sample from Melody Hoffman. So each location, the DNA that was detected was similar in the known sample compared to that evidence profile.
And you'd only expect to see that same profile in less than 1 out of 21 non-million people?
Yes, in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 21 non-million.
So does this indicate a finding then that the blood on the swabs of the Honda trunk lid matched the DNA of Melody Hoffman?
I can say that screening indicated the presence of blood on those swabs, and the DNA profile that was developed matched the known blood sample of Melody Hoffman.
Okay, moving on to item number 4, which is identified as 2 sets of Ozark Trail gloves with red stains. Can you tell us about your testing of this item and the findings you made?
Item 4 contained 4 gloves. Screening indicated the presence of blood on 4 areas of glove 1. DNA testing was attempted on swabs from one of these areas. The DNA profile developed from the outside pointer finger area indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor.
Okay, so let's talk about that finding here so we know what that means. First, you said that you identified the glove as glove 1, and then you called it item 4.1. So when we're talking about the first glove you examined, you gave it the name 4.1.
Yes.
And then on item 4.1, you found the presence of blood in 4 areas. Is that right?
Yes, screening was positive on 4 areas of glove 1 for blood.
And then we're looking at the outside pointer finger area as one of those areas, and that's called 4.11.
Yes.
4.1.1. And so in that area where screening indicated the presence of blood, you were able to identify a DNA profile.
Yes.
And that DNA profile matched that of Melody Hoffman.
It indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman.
So you found the presence of 2 individuals, and the major one, the one that had more DNA to be able to identify. Is that right?
Yes.
Matched Melody Hoffman. But the other one, you said the additional factors were insufficient. Tell us about that.
That just means that second person, I can say that there's 2 people contributing DNA to the profile that was developed. The second one, the minor contributor, there just was not enough DNA information present in that profile to draw any interpretations, and therefore I cannot compare to any known reference samples in the case.
So can you say as a result of that then that there was definitely the presence of somebody else's DNA there, but there just wasn't enough information gathered to be able to develop a profile that you can compare to a known person? Yes. Okay. The next finding says the DNA profile developed from the swabs from the inside of glove 1, 4.12 indicated a mixture of at least 3 individuals. So first question, is this the same glove, 4.12, that you referred to in the previous findings there?
Yes, so glove 1 is identified as item 4.1. Item 4.1.1 was the swabs taken from the outside pointer finger area. The swabs identified as item 4.1.2 were swabs of the inside of that same glove, glove 1.
So a swab was taken at the inside of the glove, and then as a result of that, what did you find?
The DNA profile developed from those swabs indicated a mixture of at least 3 individuals. Due to mixture complexity, no further interpretations will be made.
So you can say then on the inside of glove 4.1 that you found the presence of at least 3 different people's DNA, but because it was mixed and it was too complex, you can't make any other interpretations of it.
Correct.
Okay. So then the next finding says screening indicated the presence of blood on 4 areas of glove 2. So my question is, are we on to another glove now?
Correct. This would be what I identified as glove 2, so separate from glove 1.
And you did some DNA testing on, attempted some DNA testing on swabs from one of the areas of the 4 areas of glove 2 that indicated the presence of blood in screening.
Yes.
Okay. So then we see that your finding there. Can you tell us about that finding?
The DNA profile developed from the outside middle finger area indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor.
So on glove 2, on the outside middle finger area, you found the presence of blood. You determined that there was 2 people's DNA in that area, right?
Correct.
The major contributor, the one you could identify as Melody.
Correct. That profile matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman.
The second person, you didn't have enough information to make an identification.
Correct.
But there was definitely somebody else's DNA there.
Yes, that profile indicated a mixture of 2 individuals.
The last finding on this page was, I think that's the additional factors were insufficient to determine. That's what you're talking about, that you couldn't make an identification of the minor contributor.
Correct.
All right, we'll go on to page 3 here. And we're still, it looks like we're still talking about what we were talking about before as far as items, the gloves, but now we're moving on to the inside of that glove.
Yes, now we're on inside of glove 2.
Tell us about your findings from the inside of the glove.
The DNA profile developed from the swabs from the inside of glove 2 indicated a mixture of 3 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Dakota Van Patten. The probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 69 septillion. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profiles of the additional contributors.
Okay, so there was a swab that was taken from the inside of this glove too, and was this the same glove where the testing on the outside middle finger indicated the presence of Melody Hoffman's DNA in an area that screened positive for blood?
Yes.
Okay. And the inside of that glove, then, the swab taken of there, you were able to find, was it 3 different individuals in there?
Yes, that profile indicated a mixture of 3 individuals.
The major contributor you were able to actually develop a profile of, and that matched the known profile of Dakota Van Patten.
Yes.
And we have a different number here, 1 out of 69 septillion, but that still exceeds the human population, right?
Yes.
I don't think we need to go back into that. But, and then, as far as the other 2 individuals' DNA found in the inside of the glove, you just didn't have enough information to make a profile comparison, but there's definitely 2 other people's DNA in there.
Yes, so there was a mixture of 3 individuals. That major contributor was determined, and then the rest of the DNA information I could not interpret and therefore can't do any comparisons.
So we have a 3rd glove.
Yes.
Okay, and you identify that as item 4.3.
Correct.
You did some DNA testing on some swabs of some areas on glove 3. Can you tell us about that DNA testing and the results?
The DNA profile developed from the outside ring finger area indicated a mixture of 3 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffmanin. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profiles of the additional contributors.
So on glove 3, we're on the outside ring finger area, and there's an area that screened positive for blood. And in that area, you were able to find the major contributor's DNA was Melody, right?
Yes.
And you have 2 other people's DNA in there, but you just don't have enough information to identify.
Correct.
Sometimes people think that if somebody touches something, that necessarily their DNA is going to end up on it and be able to be identified. Is that not always the case?
Not always.
Okay, why is that?
There's many factors that go into whether or not we can interpret a profile, and there's many factors that go into how much DNA may be on an item.
What are some of those factors?
Factors for the item itself could be that if an item has been laundered, if an item has been left in heat or humidity or sunlight, those are all things that can damage DNA. There are other factors too. And then even if somebody touches something, that doesn't always mean that you're going to leave behind detectable DNA. There also could be multiple people touching an item that can all convolute the profile that's developed from a particular area.
Is it uncommon in your experience as a DNA forensic examiner to be involved in a case where somebody may have even admitted to touching something, but you still can't find a DNA profile to compare to them?
I generally don't know the information whether or not somebody has admitted to touching something, so I can't say for sure, because generally I don't know that information.
Based upon your experience, is that a conceivable scenario?
It is possible that to know somebody has handled something, but we still may not detect an individual's DNA, even if it's known to have been used or touched by an individual.
Is that something you encountered in your training? Maybe an example of that?
Possibly, yes. We did do some samples that some people have handled, but we still can't interpret and associate a portion of a profile or a profile to somebody that we know has touched an item.
Essentially, then, is that a surprising finding to you that somebody may have touched something, even admitted to it, but you can't develop a DNA profile that's with enough information to do a comparison?
It certainly is possible.
Is that not surprising to you?
Not surprising.
Okay. So I think we left off on, let's see, the top here. Did we talk about the inside of the glove 3?
I don't believe so.
Okay, let's talk about that. So there's swabs from the inside of that glove 3. What did you find when you analyzed that?
The DNA profile developed from the swabs from the inside of glove 3 indicated a mixture of at least 3 individuals. Due to mixture complexity, no further interpretations will be made.
So in essence, then you've got 3 different individuals in there, but you didn't have enough information to develop a profile.
There was DNA information there, however, it's just too convoluted. I was not able to pull out specific contributors to that mixture.
So the next finding was no stains were noted on glove 4. So you looked at glove 4 and you just didn't find anything even to analyze.
I didn't see any stains that I would screen for the presence of blood, and therefore I did not do any DNA testing on that item.
Moving on to item number 5, which appears to be the pink shirt with red stains and duct tape from the trunk of the Honda. Can you tell us about your examination of that item?
So item 5 contained what I called 3 pieces of an apparent pink shirt with duct tape. No examinations were performed on the apparent hairs on the pieces of the shirt. Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on one area on one piece of the shirt. Screening indicated the presence of blood on 5 different areas of the same piece of the shirt. DNA testing was attempted on a cutting from the wrist cuff below the tape of that piece of shirt.
Okay, so now we have an item that you've described as 5.1.1. Is that the cutting from the wrist cuff below where the duct tape was on this pink shirt?
Yes, so I identified the 3 pieces of the shirt as items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3. So item 5.1.1 is the cutting from the wrist cuff below the piece of tape on that first piece of the shirt.
In that first area, 5.1.1, what did you find?
The DNA profile developed indicated a mixture of at least 3 individuals that was too weak and too complex for conclusive interpretation.
Okay, and we've talked about what that finding means, so we don't need to go back over that, I don't think. Let's go on to the next finding.
Screening indicated the presence of blood on 3 areas on a separate piece of the shirt. DNA testing was attempted on a cutting from the stained area above the tape, which was the apparent back armpit area. The DNA profile developed matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffmanin.
So on this pink shirt, in this area that you've identified that you cut from, the second area, 5.2.1, that's where you were able to find the DNA profile of Melody Hoffmanin.
Yes, so this is from the second piece of the apparent shirt, a cutting from one of the stained areas on that piece of the shirt.
Let's go on to the next finding then. I think
Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on one area of the remaining piece of the shirt. Screening indicated the presence of blood on 3 different areas of that same piece of the shirt. DNA testing was attempted on a cutting from the apparent outside back bottom.
okay. So that you're on the back of the shirt now where you cut this.
Yes, the apparent outside back bottom.
And you called this area 5.3.1.
Yes.
Okay, and what did you find there?
The DNA profile developed matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffmanin.
Okay, so then moving on to page 4 of the report, we're on item number 6 now, which is the hair stuck to the duct tape from the trunk of the Honda. What did you do with that item?
Item 6 contained duct tape with numerous apparent hairs. Screening indicated the presence of blood on the swabs taken from 2 areas of the duct tape. The DNA profile developed from the swab taken from a stained area on the smooth side of the tape indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffmanin. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor. The DNA profile developed from the swab from a stained area on the sticky side of a tape end indicated a mixture of 3 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffmanin. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profiles of the additional contributors.
So on this particular piece of duct tape with the numerous hairs, on the smooth side of the tape, you were able to identify as the major contributor Melody Hoffman's DNA, but not the other person's DNA on the smooth side.
Yes.
And then on the sticky side, there's 3 people, but you were only able to identify one as Melody because she was the major contributor.
Yes, it was a mixture of 3 individuals. The major profile or major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman. The additional factors detected were, it was insufficient for comparison.
Moving on to your examination of 5 hairs there. Tell us about that examination.
5 hairs were microscopically evaluated, and the root ends of all 5 of those hairs were found to be suitable for nuclear DNA testing. The 5 hairs were sampled for DNA analysis. The DNA profile developed from the cuttings of the root portions of those hairs matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman.
And so when you examined these hairs, then you found the presence of Melody's DNA within the root portions of the hair.
Yes, so I sampled the root portions of those 5 hairs, and the profile that was developed from those hair roots matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman.
Normally, are you able as a DNA forensic examiner to identify DNA from hair?
If a hair has a root attached to it, it is possible to develop a DNA profile.
Why is that?
The root portion of the hair contains DNA. Therefore, there's a chance if there is a root still attached that we can get a DNA profile.
And is it your understanding from your biology background that the root is the area of the hair that's connected to the scalp was the head?
Yes, that's the end that is closest to a scalp.
And so in order to examine that, not only would you have to have hair removed from the scalp, but the root area removed as well to examine it.
Correct.
Okay, so moving on to item number 7, and that's the 2 pieces of the paracord knotted together. Can you tell us about your findings there?
The DNA profile developed from the knot area and adjacent frayed end of the paracord indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor.
Okay, so on this area of the paracord in the knot area in the adjacent frayed end, you found Melody's DNA to be the major contributor in that area, and the other person's DNA you just couldn't identify.
Correct.
What's the next finding?
The DNA profile developed from the swabs of the shorter tail of the paracord indicated a mixture of 3 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profiles of the additional contributors.
So in this area, the shorter tail of the paracord, did you mark that as item 7.2?
Yes.
Okay. So again, the major contributor you were able to match to the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffman.
Yes.
But in this area, we have the presence of 2 other individuals besides Melody Hoffman.
Yes, it indicated a mixture of 3 individuals, and the major was matched to Melody Hoffman. The additional factors were insufficient to determine the profiles of those other individuals.
And again, does that, to clarify, that's overall 3 distinct individuals?
Yes, that profile indicated a mixture of 3 individuals.
Your Honor, may I approach witness?
May.
For identification purposes, on the handy was been marked as State's Exhibit 18. I think it's QQQ. You recognize this?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And what does this contain to your knowledge?
That is the bag that contained the green paracord that was submitted for testing.
Item number 7 up here.
Correct, that has laboratory item number 7.
taping and resealing that was done here. Is that something that you did?
Yes, I can see the evidence tape down here on the bottom edges. It has my date and my initials and dates on the evidence tape seal.
So this indicates that you accessed this and then resealed it?
So yes, I would have opened the item down on the bottom edges where my evidence tape seal is. Up on top, you can see the item, the days that I examined it, and then down on the bottom, you can see when I was finished with my examinations. This red evidence tape seal indicates the areas that I sealed the item up after completion of my testing.
Whose notes are these on here?
I can see on this particular item, I can see a yellow barcode up here on the top corner. It has the laboratory case and item number. Right underneath of that, I can identify my date, my initials and dates on there. And then there's also a brief item description of what is within the bag.
Okay, we're still on item number 7 here. We had talked about the second finding. I think we were down to screening did not indicate the presence of blood on swabs involving the long tails of the paracord. Can you tell us about that finding?
Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on the swabs of the unstained portions of the long tails of the paracord. The DNA profile developed indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffmanin. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor.
So in the long tails of the paracord, you found a mixture of 2 individuals, but were only able to identify the major contributor, that being Melody.
Yes, that would be the unstained portions, the apparent unstained portions of those long tails of the paracord.
Okay, got it. Moving on to the next finding, I think we're still talking about the paracord. Can you talk about that?
Screening indicated the presence of blood on one area of the paracord. The DNA profile developed from the swabs of the stained portion of the paracord indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffmanin. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor.
So in this area where blood was found on the paracord, that's where you were able to identify 2 individuals, but the profile of the major contributor was Melody, the other one not able to identify.
Correct.
Okay, now we're moving on to number 8, which is a knife. Pocket knife with red stains from the Honda, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us about your examination of that item?
Screening indicated the presence of blood on swabs of 2 areas of the knife. The DNA profile developed from a portion of the knife blade and the top edge of the handle indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffmanin. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor.
And this is an area that you marked as 8.1, that being the portion of the knife blade and top edge of the handle.
Yes.
What was your next finding?
The DNA profile developed from the scalloped bottom and back edges of the knife handle indicated a mixture of 3 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffmanin. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profiles of the additional contributors.
So with respect to this knife that was the pocket knife with red stains from the Honda, the first area, 8.1, on the portion of the knife blade and top edge, you found 2 distinct individuals and were able to identify Melody.
Yes, it was a mixture of 2. The major contributor was associated to Melody Hoffmanin.
And then the second area that you identified as 8.2 is from the scalped bottom and back edges of the knife handle.
Yes.
And that's where you found 3 distinct individuals.
Yes, that indicated a mixture of 3 individuals.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
recognize this?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and what is this?
This is laboratory item number 8. It has identification on there as pocket knife with red stains. I can see a laboratory yellow barcode with my initials and date that I examined, and I can also see on the bottom edge here a area where I read evidence tape sealed it after completion of my testing, which has also has my initials and date on there.
And is this described as pocket knife with red stains from compartment under radio and Honda?
That's what it says on there.
All right, moving on to item number 10, which is described as a paper fold containing fingernail scrapings from McKinley Louisma. What kind of testing did you do on that?
Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on the swabs of the fingernail scrapings and scraper end. The DNA factors detected were too weak for conclusive interpretation.
So no blood on the fingernail scrapings and no, not enough factors to develop a DNA profile.
There were factors present, but not enough for me to interpret that profile that was developed.
The next items that you examine are items 11 and 12, which are described as right fingernail clippings collected at the time of autopsy. That's 11. And left fingernail clippings collected at the time of autopsy. That's 12. And this is obviously of Melody Hoffmanin. What did you find there?
Screening indicated the presence of blood on the swabs of the right and left fingernail clippings and clipper ends. No DNA factors foreign to Melody Hoffmanin were detected in the profiles developed.
What's that mean?
So that just means all of the DNA information that was developed in the profile developed from the right fingernail clippings and clipper end, and also the profile from the left fingernail clipping and clipper ends. All the DNA that was detected, it was all associated back to Melody Hoffmanin. There was no DNA foreign to her detected in those profiles.
So in this instance, unlike some of the other findings, you didn't even find the presence of other individuals that you could identify.
Correct. The profiles developed from these two samples were single source. There was only one contributor detected.
The next item you examined was item number 13, lab item number 13, the sealed sexual assault kit bearing the name of Melody Hoffmanin, taken at the time of the autopsy exam. What did you find there?
Screening indicated the presence of blood, but did not indicate the presence of seminal fluid on the oral swabs. One spermatozoon was microscopically identified in the oral sample. No DNA factors foreign to Melody Hoffmanin were detected in the profile developed from the epithelial fraction of the oral sample. The DNA factors detected from the sperm fraction of the oral sample were too weak for conclusive interpretation.
So this indicates testing done on an oral swab of Melody Hoffmanin.
Yes.
And you were able to microscopically identify one spermatozoon. What's that mean?
That just means one singular sperm cell.
But it looks like even after you did that extraction process you talked about earlier that's in the report there, that you didn't have enough from that extraction to make an identification from the sperm fraction.
Yes, the DNA factors detected from the sperm fraction of the oral sample were too weak for conclusive interpretation.
And then from the epithelial fraction of that sample, Melody Hoffmanin's DNA was there, but there wasn't enough factors to identify anybody else.
The profile from the epithelial fraction of the oral sample was single source, only one contributor detected, and there was no DNA factors foreign to Melody Hoffmanin detected in that profile.
Let's go to your next finding. Screening indicated the presence of seminal fluid on the anal swabs. Can you talk about that?
Screening indicated the presence of seminal fluid on the anal swabs. However, no spermatozoa were microscopically observed in the anal sample. No DNA factors foreign to Melody Hoffmanin were detected in the profile developed from the epithelial fraction of the anal sample. No DNA profile was developed from the sperm fraction of the anal sample.
So then as a result of your analysis of the the seminal fluid in the anal swab, then again, you didn't find a spermatozoa.
I did not find any spermatozoa in the anal sample.
But you still did the extraction process to look at the epithelial fraction of that?
Yes, I still did the differential extraction on the anal swabs.
So you're going to get an analysis of the epithelial fraction, but not a sperm fraction.
So I did the epithelial fraction. There was no factors foreign to Melody Hoffmanin detected. And then in that sperm fraction in the anal sample, there was no DNA profile developed. So there was no DNA factors detected in that profile.
And the final note here underneath the examination sexual assault kit, screening did not indicate the presence of seminal fluid on the vaginal swabs and no spermatozoa were microscopically observed in the vaginal sample. Just what does that mean?
So my screening tests for seminal fluid were negative, and I did not identify any spermatozoa in the vaginal sample.
So nothing found on the vaginal sample.
As far as screening wise, the screening tests were negative, and I did not identify any sperm in that sample.
Are you able to tell from, well, I guess this continues on to the next page here. No DNA factors foreign to Melody Hoffmanin was detected in the epithelial, and again, DNA factors detected from the sperm fraction. So I guess explain that, because if you didn't have the presence of seminal fluid, then you still did an extraction process? Maybe I'm not reading that right.
So the screening tests were negative for seminal fluid on the vaginal sample. I still did the differential extraction procedure, and therefore I made a microscopic slide, and I did not identify any spermatozoa on the slide that was created, or the slide of the vaginal sample. The epithelial fraction profile, it was single source, and no DNA factors foreign to Melody Hoffmanin were detected from the epithelial fraction of that vaginal sample. And then that sperm fraction of the vaginal sample, there was factors detected, but they were just too weak. There's not enough information for me there to draw any conclusions from the DNA detected.
The final note here on item number 13, the sexual assault kit, says no examinations were performed on the known buccal or blood samples. So you had already gotten a DNA profile from the blood stains from the autopsy, right?
Yes, so within the sexual assault kit that was collected at autopsy, there was also buccal samples, or known buccal samples, and also a known blood sample. Separately, there was a laboratory item submitted with a different blood sample from Melody Hoffmanin. I simply just chose to take that blood sample as opposed to taking the ones that were in the sexual assault kit.
To be clear here, as we move on from the sexual assault kit examination, when it comes to detecting seminal fluid in these areas, is there any way for you as a DNA forensic analyzer to determine or conclude when those samples will be deposited?
No, based on our DNA testing, I can't say when DNA was deposited, nor can I say how DNA was deposited.
Moving on here, now we're on item number 14, which is the underwear of the victim. So Melody Hoffmanin's underwear. What kind of testing did you do on that?
Screening did not indicate the presence of seminal fluid on the swabs from the inside crotch area of the underwear. No DNA factors foreign to Melody Hoffmanin were detected in the profile developed, and I did not examine the apparent hairs that were present on the underwear.
Okay. Moving on to item number 16. So now we're on to a different set of items here. This is a swab from the unknown flaky yellow substance at Morgan Creek Park, which I think we've seen pictures of already in this trial. What kind of analysis did you do on that?
Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on the swabs taken from Morgan Creek Park, specifically laboratory item 16. The DNA profile developed from the unknown substance sample indicated a mixture of two individuals. The partial profile of the major female contributor was determined. Further interpretation may be attempted if known DNA samples from potential sources are submitted. Melody Hoffmanin, McKinley Louisma, Dakota Van Patten, and Logan Kimpton were eliminated as the source of the DNA profile that was developed. and the additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor.
So for lab number items 16 through 19, which are the swabs from the flaky yellow substance at Morgan Creek Park, the dried fluid in the parking lot, the unknown amber substance north of the picnic table, and the swab of the unknown substance from the south of the picnic table. At least when it comes to the flaky substance, you eliminated all 4 of these individuals as a source of DNA.
Yes, those 4 individuals were eliminated as the source of the major female profile that was developed from this sample.
And then for the dried fluid on the parking lot, 17, and the unknown substance from the south of the picnic table, that's 19. For 17 and 19, you didn't find any DNA profile.
Correct. No DNA profiles were developed from the parking lot and south of picnic table samples.
And then for the unknown amber substance north of the picnic table, it looks like, and that's number 18, there's some DNA there, but you didn't have enough information to make an interpretation.
Correct.
Okay, so moving on to number 20, we're on to the clear frame glasses right now. Tell us about your analysis of the clear frame glasses.
The DNA profile developed from the swabs from the temple tips and nose pieces of the glasses indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The partial profile of the major contributor was consistent with the known DNA profile of Dakota Van Patten. The probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 2.6 septillion. The additional factor present was insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor.
So on these glasses, there's 2 people, but you had enough information from the partial profile to identify the major contributor as being consistent with Mr. Van Patten.
Yes.
And that's from the temple tips and nose piece of the glasses.
Yes.
But the other persons that you identified there just didn't have enough information for.
Correct.
Okay, moving on to item number 21, which is a pair of Nike gray shoes. Can you tell us about your analysis of that item?
Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on 8 areas of the left shoe and 6 areas on the right shoe. No DNA testing was attempted on this item.
So you didn't have anything that was shown to indicate the presence of blood, so you didn't do any testing.
Correct.
Okay, so item number 22 then is the gray sweatpants. You said no examination was performed on that. Do you remember why that was?
I had spoken to Special Agent Kedley prior to processing the items in this case, and given the sheer number of items that were submitted, I asked if there was any way we could kind of slim down and kind of focus our testing at that time, and at that time he decided this was one of the items that did not need to be examined on the first round of DNA testing.
We also have forest green Under Armour sweatshirt, which is item number 23 here. Tell us about your examination of that item.
No stains were noted on the sweatshirt, and no DNA testing was attempted on that sweatshirt.
So nothing even to screen?
I did not find any areas suitable for screening.
Moving on to page 7. We're on item number 24, which is the pink Hey Dude shoes. Can you tell us about your analysis of that item?
Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on 2 areas of the left shoe and 2 areas of the right shoe. Screening indicated the presence of blood on 1 area of the left shoe. The DNA factors detected from the swabs of the top toe box of the left shoe were too weak for conclusive interpretation.
So screening indicates blood present, but not enough information to make a conclusion.
Correct.
Moving on to item number 25, which is the black capri pants. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that another one where Special Agent Kelly said, we don't need to look at that?
Correct.
Just trying to save you some work because of all the...
Yes, there were numerous items submitted for the first round of testing.
Item number 26 is the multicolor cell phone case. Tell us about your examination of that.
The DNA profile developed from the swabs of the buttons on the side of the phone case indicated a mixture of at least 2 individuals that was too weak for conclusive interpretation.
Okay. So I think we know from your testimony what that means there. Finally, number 28 is the black beanie. You didn't do an examination on that?
Correct, no exams were performed on that black beanie.
Okay, so I think we'll move on to the next report then. So this is report 3, and it contains a lot of the same information that we had you describe in the previous reports, so we're not going to go back over that. On this first page here, is there, again, a description of the date items were submitted to the laboratory, and then description of those items with lab and agency numbers?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and scroll through that and get down to the explanation portion here. And so you begin doing some explanation here. In the first paragraph, you're asking the reader here to refer back to a previous examination. Just tell us about that.
It says see DNA Report 2 for the previous examinations of the known buccal samples of McKinley Louisma, Dakota Van Patten, and Logan Kimpton, and the known blood sample of Melody Hoffmanin.
Basically, if you want to know what an item number is, look back at report 2.
So yeah, that's just saying that the known DNA profiles of those individuals were previously developed and discussed in report number 2.
So let's go on to the body of the report then and the results of the examination on the next page, starting with item number 31, which you described on the first page as a white watch band with red stains. Can you tell us about the testing you did on that?
Screening indicated the presence of blood on the swabs taken from the stained portions and the apparent unstained portions of the watch bands. The DNA profile developed from the stained portions sample indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Melody Hoffmanin. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor. The DNA profile developed from the apparent unstained portions sample indicated a mixture of at least 2 individuals that was too weak for conclusive interpretation.
So with regard to the watch band here, the major contributor of the DNA was identified as Melody Hoffmanin, but the other person, you didn't have enough information to make a conclusion.
Yes, for the sample taken from the stained portions of the watch band.
The next item that you examined was lab number 32, which is a white-handled knife. Can you tell us about your examination there?
Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on the swabs taken from one side of the knife blade. No DNA profile was developed.
So you didn't find blood, and therefore you didn't have an ability to find DNA from blood, but you found no DNA.
So the screening test was negative. The screening tests were negative for blood. I still attempted to do or did DNA testing on that item. However, no DNA profile was developed from that sample.
The next item is lab number 33, agency number 19. It's a machete and black sheath. Can you tell us about the testing there?
Item 33 contained a machete within a sheath. Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on one side of the machete blade and teeth. The DNA factors detected were too weak for conclusive interpretation. The DNA profile developed from the swabs taken from the rough areas of the machete handle indicated a mixture of at least 2 individuals that was too weak for conclusive interpretation. Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on the swabs taken from the inside top opening of the sheath. No DNA testing was attempted on those swabs, and no examinations were performed on the apparent hairs on the sheath.
So with item 33 here, you weren't able to make a DNA profile match or comparison.
From the profiles that were developed, I was not able to interpret any portion of those profiles and therefore cannot do any comparison to known samples.
The next item is item number 34, law enforcement number 25, also machete and black sheath. Can you tell us about your examination of that item?
Item 34 contained a machete within a sheath. Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on the swabs taken from the top and bottom edges of the machete blade. The DNA profile developed indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Logan Kimpton. The probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 29 nonillion. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor.
Okay, so that was your first finding there, that in the area of the top and bottom edges of the machete blade, you were able to develop a profile 34.1 with a major contributor of Logan Kimpton.
Yes, the major was associated to Logan Kimpton.
And what's your second finding?
The DNA profile developed from the swabs taken from the rough areas of the machete handle indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Logan Kimpton. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor.
And then what's your final finding?
Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on the swabs taken from the inside top opening of the sheath. No DNA testing was attempted on those swabs.
Okay. We're on to item number 35 here, which is black gloves with stains. Can you tell us about your testing on that?
Screening indicated the presence of blood on 3 areas of the gloves. DNA testing was attempted on 2 of these areas. The DNA profile developed from a cutting from the palm of the left glove indicated a mixture of at least 4 individuals. Due to mixture complexity, no further interpretations will be made. The DNA profile developed from the swabs taken from the top side of the right glove indicated a mixture of at least 3 individuals that was too weak for conclusive interpretation. The DNA profile developed from the swabs taken from the inside of both gloves indicated a mixture of at least 4 individuals. Due to mixture complexity, no further interpretations will be made, and no examinations were performed on the apparent hairs on the gloves.
Item number 36 contained a machete within a sheath. Can you tell us about your testing of that?
Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on the swabs taken from the top and bottom edges of the machete blade. The DNA factors detected were too weak for conclusive interpretation. The DNA profile developed from the swabs taken from the rough areas of the machete handle indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Logan Kimpton. The additional factors present were insufficient to determine the profile of the minor contributor. Screening did not indicate the presence of blood on the swabs taken from the inside top opening of the sheath. No DNA testing was attempted on those swabs.
Item number 37 is identified as Van Patten's clothing from February 19th. That contained 1 long sleeve shirt, 1 pair of pants. What did you find when you examined that?
Item 37 contained a long sleeve shirt and 1 pair of pants. No stains were noted on the shirt or the pants, and no DNA testing was attempted on those items.
And finally, you tested lab number 38, agency number 58, described as a used roll of duct tape. Tell us about your testing of that item.
Screening indicated the presence of blood on swabs taken from 2 areas of the duct tape roll. DNA testing was attempted on 1 of these areas. The DNA profile developed from the inside ring of the tape roll indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. Melody Hoffmanin and Dakota Van Patten were included as contributors to this mixture. The probability of finding a contributor to this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 750 billion. Statistics were applied at 19 loci.
So this item, lab number 38, then, that's described as the used roll of duct tape. You found the presence of blood through screening on 2 areas of that roll,
Yes,
and did your testing on one of those areas.
yes,
And that was on the inside ring of the tape roll, so not the tape itself, but inside the tape roll.
correct. It was like the inside, kind of like cardboardy material on the inside of a duct tape roll. There was a stained area on the inside of there that I swabbed, and the profile that was developed is identified as 38.1.
And that, again, that's an area that had in the screen positive for blood.
Yes, screening did indicate the presence of blood on that area.
And then there were 2 individuals there, one Melody Hoffmanin, the other one Dakota Van Patten, were included as contributors.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're done with this for now.
Council, we're at 3 o'clock, so why don't we go ahead and take our afternoon break.
Okay.
So we'll be in recess for 15 minutes. Jurors, please remember the admonition. Have a good break. All right, we're back on the record in FECR 153477. Agent Schneider, you're still under oath, and Mr. Maybanks, you can continue your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Carly, in your education, training, experience, and background, have you found or learned that some people have a tendency to shed or leave behind more DNA or more easily profiled DNA than others?
Yes.
Can you explain that phenomenon, for lack of a better term?
So there is a phenomenon called somebody's shedder status. And essentially that is the propensity of somebody to just inherently leave behind DNA by a simple touch. So some people more readily than others, if by simply touching a surface, will deposit more DNA than others.
Is there anything that's been identified in the literature or otherwise that would contribute to that?
There are many variations or many ways people can go through that. It is in the literature too that people's shedder status can change over time. So it is not something that is permanent. You know, one person is a high shedder for their whole life. It can vary depending on many different things.
When you have an object that after you test it, you're able to develop a DNA profile suitable for comparison and actually make a comparison to a known profile, but that sample contains other individuals on it, like in this case, right? Okay,
So,
I'm not done with my question yet.
Okay.
Are you with me so far?
Sure.
Okay, so in that situation, are you able to tell in your education, training, experience whether the person whose profile is identified touched or handled an object more than the other people who weren't identified?
No, I can't say based on the profile that's developed how that DNA was deposited or the manner of which that DNA was deposited.
So can you scientifically say that because you had enough DNA to make a profile for one individual but not another, that one with the profile had to have been the person who handled it the most or did the most with it?
Not necessarily. It can be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they handled that item the most.
And along those same lines, when you have the presence of DNA on an object but not enough information to develop a profile like we saw on several of these items in your report, are you able then to eliminate a known profile as a contributor?
No, in the instance, if we cannot draw any interpretations or conclusions from a profile that's developed, I cannot include or exclude anybody as being a contributor to that profile or the portion of the profile that I cannot interpret.
So for example, when you have an item in this case like we saw that has 3 individuals on it, and you're able to identify one person, you know there's a third individual, you're not able to affirmatively say it's not a person with a known profile.
Correct. If there's a portion of the profile that's too weak, I cannot say for certain somebody is included, and I can't say for certain somebody is excluded.
It's just a matter of having enough information to be able to make a comparison on scientific standards.
Correct. If there is not enough information to interpret, therefore, I cannot go on to the next step of comparing known profiles to something that is too weak or too complex.
That's all I have at this time, Your Honor.
Cross?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Schneider.
Good afternoon.
By my quick count, you analyzed probably over 30 items. Does that sound right?
Possibly. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but there were several items submitted that I examined.
And of all the items and all the locations on the specific items, the only match you found from my client McKinley was item 9 on your report 2, which was the swab that he provided, correct?
So there was a known DNA profile developed from the buccal swab from Mr. Louisma that he provided. However, out of all the evidentiary profiles that were developed in this case, none of the interpretable portions of the profiles or the interpretable profiles were associated back to Mr. Louisma.
In other words, you can only include and say that you found McKinley Louisma's DNA on the known buccal swab that he provided.
Yes, his DNA was present on his buccal swab. However, again, from all of the
Objection, non-responsive. The witness is answered.
Sustained.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Redirect.
Would you like to further explain that answer?
I was just going to say that his DNA was present on the buccal swab that he provided. However, the evidentiary samples of the profiles that were able to be interpreted or the portions that could be interpreted, none of them were associated back to Mr. Louisma.
Are you able to affirmatively exclude Mr. Louisma as being the minor contributor that you did not develop a profile from on any of these objects?
If from the minor profiles that were too weak to be determined, I cannot specifically include or exclude any person as being a contributor to those portions of profiles.
Does that include the ones where there was mixtures as well?
So if there was a mixture, if a portion of it was associated to an individual, Mr. Louisma would be eliminated as being that contributor. However, the rest of the profile that was too weak or too complex, I cannot include or exclude Mr. Louisma as being a contributor to that profile or portion of profile.
Thank you. Nothing further, Carly. I think you can make it home.
Cross.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.